Hey, what's up, guys? So today, welcome back to the channel. First of all, welcome back to the channel, man. It's your boy. It is your host. It's your boy, Ozzy, man. Thank you guys for tuning in. But I wanted to get this off my chest, off my nipples. You know what I'm saying? As I was walking on my walk. And you gotta understand something, man. Compassion without boundaries is just blindness. And I say this because I've been the type of person in my past where I was just very compassionate. I had a lot of compassion for people. And I had boundaries, but I was hesitant to enforce my boundaries because I would always make excuses for people. I would always look at what they've been through and try to reason through their pain without acknowledging their inflictions on myself. You get what I'm saying? So as I got older and I got wiser and I experienced more in life, I realized that I was just in blindness, you know, essentially walking with a blindfold on, or in a fight with one hand tied to my leg, right? When you don't have boundaries, but you're compassionate, you're in a very dangerous place. And you don't want to be in a place where every time somebody crosses your boundary, you're quick to forgive them. And I know the Bible says that you should forgive people, but the Bible also says that God doesn't like cowardice. And that's a form of cowardice when you think about it, because God gave us free will. You know, especially as a man, you're supposed to stand up for yourself because essentially you're allowing injustice upon yourself. You know, same, you can register it to, the false badge of honor syndrome. You know, I'll suffer. And while suffering is a part of the process, that's not the same thing. Suffering is, telling yourself no for a long period of time to get what you really want to be in life. You know what, these Jordans look cool, but I really want to take this trip to Italy next year. So I'm gonna hold off on these Jordans and I'm gonna get my passport. Suffering is if you're overweight and you're out of shape, and you want to get in shape. Suffering in this regard is making sure you're going to the gym 4 to 5 times a week, doing calisthenics 4 to 5 times a week, you know, watching your macros, getting your protein in, getting your steps in, doing your stretches, right? Suffering, instead of lashing out with your emotions when you're angry, is journaling, meditating, talking to God, finding a quiet place, focusing on some hobbies, trying to find new hobbies. We give ourselves, and I'm a man, so I can say this, we give ourselves this false sense of honor by suffering in the wrong direction, by allowing people to step on our boundaries, by allowing disrespect from others and ourselves. Sometimes we step on our own boundaries by not keeping what promises to ourselves. Hey man, I'm gonna get up and work out 5 days this week. You get out, do 2 hard days, and now all of a sudden you deserve to eat a bunch of crumble, right? You deserve to take a day off, take 2 days off, my bad, not a day, because you need rest. Your body needs time to recover. That's a real thing. But a lot of times, fellas, we, we tend to, we tend to put on this false sense of honor, and that leads to this blindness because we become over compassionate about the wrong things. Somebody can be blatantly disrespecting you in your face, but because you have such compassion, and compassion by itself isn't a bad thing, but right? I don't want to say that. I don't want to misconstrued and no one think like, okay, well, I'll never be compassionate again. That's not what I'm saying. But compassion without limits, without clear guidelines for yourself and what you expect from other people is blindness. Without those boundaries in play, you're blind. You're blind to this false sense of honor. You're blind to your compassion because you think you're doing the right thing. How do I know? I used to be that guy. You think that you're doing the right thing. You're not doing the right thing. You know, and when you read the Bible from an objective standpoint, I used to read the Bible from a subjective standpoint, but now I read it from a more of an objective standpoint. And I get the word in. I subscribe to a church that's in Tulsa. It's not the church that I can physically go to, but I watch the videos and, I pay attention. And oftentimes, man, God is a warrior. So a warrior is going to have boundaries. And if we're made in his image, which we are, we should have boundaries. God has compassion, yes, but he also has boundaries. And I'm not telling you again, I'm not saying, hey, you can't have compassion with people. You can. But when you don't have those boundaries, that's when a lot of disrespect comes. Sometimes it's not blatant disrespect. And I'm a true believer, not a fan. I'm a true believer that you don't know what you don't know. Because a lot of us, especially growing up in certain areas and demographics, a lot of us have been around people that had information that could have helped us, but they chose to not tell us certain things. Right? Speaking of myself, when I was younger, I grew up around cousins who would get girls, but they never taught me how to get girls. They never gave me no kind of pointers. And I'm not saying it was their responsibility, but when you have compassion for other people, you reach out. Hey man, hey, don't do that. Hey man, be yourself. Don't do this. Fill in the blank. You can fill in this blank with any scenario, but I'm just using that as an example. So when you don't have these boundaries, when you don't have compassion, when you do have compassion, but you don't have these boundaries, you're setting yourself up for so much disrespect, disregard from the world, from yourself, and it's not just strangers, because most of the time it won't be strangers. People talk a lot of crap, but most of the stuff will come from people and especially family. How do I know? I've experienced this. I've experienced this in a multitude of ways. You get what I'm saying? But I didn't have the knowledge. I didn't have the understanding until later on in my years. I'm glad that I went through these things because that experience taught me something. But had I had the knowledge, then I would have never went through it. You get what I'm saying? So and that's another key point that I'm making in this video, man. Pick up a book, read something new. I love anime and nights and stuff as much as the next dude, bro. But I also understand how this world works. I understand how people work. I understand that it's a lot of evil and manipulative people that walk around with smiles all day. And this is why I always come to you guys as 100% genuine. And while I do keep some things that to myself, I'm not afraid to tell you guys, hey, I've messed up. I was looking kind of crazy at some point, because that's important. It's important to be human to one another. You got to be able to see these things and understand these things about life. Because if you don't, man, you could end up in a situation where, dude, life is just going to continue to kick you in the balls, man. And life ain't going to stop because your balls is hurt. There's always going to be something. There's always going to be someone, a scenario, a person, place, a thing, or a situation that's going to bring stress, drama, or trauma to your life. So you have to be aware of your boundaries. Speaking of boundaries, I just had a situation with a family member where I had to impose my boundary over something of long conversations at different points of time, where this specific type of thing, I always let this family member know, hey, if I don't like when people do that, I will cut you off and never think about you again. They did that thing, and now we don't talk. I don't feel bad about it. because there were multiple warnings. They knew this about me. You get what I'm saying? But had I not had the boundary and just the compassion, I would be apologizing for nothing. I will be apologizing for respecting myself. When you don't have boundaries, dude, you'll end up apologizing for just respecting yourself. You have to be able to do this, fellas. You gotta be able to say, I don't like this. I'm not gonna tolerate this. And if that means we never talk again, if that means I have to cut you out of my life, then so be it. But I have my self-respect. And if it's something, and you know you fellas, so you'll know when it's something that you truly do not like. And you know the disrespect. And you know when cause you can feel it, right? You can feel when you really don't like being treated or something, whatever it is, fill in the blank towards you. And there's nothing wrong with saying, hey, I don't like what you said to me. I don't like what you did to me. I don't like this, fill in the blank. Because people think that because they did it before, that they can do it again. And this is another thing too, fellas. When you have these boundaries, right, and you start doing these things, you're going to notice that people are going to expect you to still not have those boundaries. So when you enforce these boundaries, understand you're going to be faced with discord. Because basically, it's an Uno reverse slap in their face for you standing up for you. Understand, when people are used to treating you a certain type of way, they don't like when you set boundaries. They don't like when you wake up. NPCs, that's what they pretty much are. NPCs don't like when you, oh, wait a minute, oh, I ain't feeling this. Yeah, you chill out with all that. And you stand on that shit, oh, that pisses them off. But you're not responsible for their disrespect. Because most of the time, people know when they're disrespecting you. Well, no matter how they try to paint it. So don't be blind, fellas. You know, some of my female viewers out there, don't be blind either, ladies. You know, there's nothing wrong with having healthy boundaries. Now, if there are instances where you can, okay, especially if it's somebody that you just get to meet. But if there's a clear pattern of, here we go again. You know, because people, like I said, I'm a firm believer of people not knowing what they don't know. You know, yes, you can tell people your boundaries, you know, depending on the scenario, that's a good thing and it could be a bad thing because there are people out there that will test you. But I believe in just telling them straight off the rip. Because once you test me, that's proof in the pudding. Once they test you after you tell them a boundary, that's all you proof you need right there. These people don't respect you. Because if I tell you, hey, I don't like this, and you go ahead and do it anyway, that's the clearest indicator of lack of respect on your behalf. If never ever in the rest of your life. You get what I'm saying? So you want to be aware of this, fellas. You want to be aware of this. You don't want to be in a situation where, you know, people are taking you for granted, man. Because it's been times, if it wasn't for God, I promise you guys right now, I'd be in jail for the rest of my life. I'd be in jail for the rest of my life. You know, and I say that wholeheartedly. But I've leaned on God and I was like, you know what? And I took responsibility for where I wasn't standing up for myself. And I was like, you know what? Screw this. Screw this. I'm not trying to convince you of nothing. I told you what I don't like. You chose to press the test button anyway. You know, the try me button on the toys back in the day from like, you know what I'm saying, Toy Wiz, Toys R Us, the try me button. Yeah, you chose to still hit the try me button. Cause you thought shit was sweet. And you gotta let a motherfucker know sometimes, man. Sometimes you have to do that. And that doesn't make you a bad person. And that's the one of the, you don't get anything from this message, you are not a bad person for having boundaries. Healthy boundaries. Cause some people do be tripping. You know what I'm saying? Some people do be tripping. But boundaries are subjected to the person. You know, there are baseline boundaries. I'm not gonna say that there isn't, but you are not wrong for that. All right, fellas, you're not wrong for standing up for yourself. You're not wrong for saying, "Hey, I don't like this." And if the person pursues, you're not wrong for cutting them off. Because, fellas, let me tell you, unless somebody's trying to hurt you, you don't need to go to jail, bro. Man, what shit's getting crazy, prices getting higher. You don't want to do 5 years in jail, come out for 5 years in jail, and milk's $30. Hopefully, hopefully we never get to that point. But you get what I'm saying, right? You don't, you just, it doesn't make sense. When you do the math, it just doesn't make sense. You get what I'm saying? So I want you guys to have a great day. Thank you guys for tuning into the video. I'm gonna try to do some more videos like this, you know, when I'm walking after my workouts. I really think this will help. So stay in the pocket. You feel me? Stay fresh with the topics, you know, things that's on my mind. I can immediately just get it out to you guys, you know, without worrying about likes and setup like that. I'm gonna still do those videos, but I'm gonna start implementing these a bit more into the channel, you know. And if you guys can relate to what I'm talking about, man, get in the comment section. You know, tell me if you've experienced stuff like this. I love to, you know, chop it up with my audience and, you know, we discuss these topics because while everybody's talking about female nature and money, you know, we're talking about how to really be a human being that has value for themselves. Because when you have value for yourself, that value automatically shifts out to the world. And if we keep compounding that, the whole world will just become a better place, man. But it starts with us as individuals first. So I appreciate you guys yapping out with me, man. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll talk to you guys in another video, man. I'm out.